English language learners. We have some teachers here to present. Welcome. Glad you're here. Please come on down. They're going to present about the English language learners program, which is under our CSIP goal for student performance.
You're a proud alumnus of that.
I am proud alum. So, Mr. Hanson, are you going to kick this off?
I'm going to get us started.
Okay.
All right. Jamie mentioned we're going to talk about our ELL program, and we have our two teachers in the program here to speak with you tonight, Sima Aramimish and Karen Sprouse. And I'm going to turn it over to them for most of this, but I'm going to get started just a little bit on a kind of a district global overview of the program to set the stage, and then we'll let them talk about the work that they do with our kids. So first, the alphabet soup part of this. You'll see a lot of these terms used interchangeably throughout the presentation, and anytime we talk about this program, we have ESL, which is English as a second language, ELL, English language learners, and LEP students, limited English proficient students. So those are all used pretty much interchangeably, and we'll probably throw a few different few ones around tonight, but they mean the same thing. We are working with kids whose primary language is something other than English, and making sure that we educate them, and this is a support service to help them learn English and help them academically both, and you'll hear that tonight. We do cover kids starting in kindergarten and going all the way through high school graduation if necessary to help with this program. A little bit about the district services we have for these kids. You're going to hear tonight about the first bullet, the ELL program, but we also receive a little bit of federal funding in our Title programs. Under Title III, we do receive some money that we can use to help with these kids. What we've elected to use it for is for tutoring outside the school day, both on English skills and academic skills. We've also purchased some Rosetta Stone licenses for use for the kids, and their parents can use it. And we use those for some of the kids that come in knowing almost no English, and that helps just helps get started. And we also can utilize these funds for some professional development for our teaching staff. So a couple different things, but the ELL program is what we'll look at tonight. First, for our district, these are our numbers. We have 128 total, 72 of which are at Truman Elementary, so a pretty high concentration. So this represents the kids who are receiving services in our ELL program. We also have an additional 40 students that are on what's called a monitoring status. They're on the other end. They've exited out of the program, but they're still being monitored, and they'll talk with you about that tonight, for a total of 168. So either one of those numbers, 128 or 168, represents between 3 and 4% of our district of 4,000 kids. So it's not an overwhelming number, but for us, just a few years ago in 2009, we had 29 ELL students.
Wow.
And that had been the number traditionally.
Wow.
30, give or take, 30 students, give or take a little bit on either side, was a common number. So you can see over the last few years, we've grown a lot for us. A lot of that has to do with expanded programs at the university. Mainly, we're talking the graduate level, people coming to get their PhDs, old enough to have children and bring them with them. That's one of the reasons you see such higher numbers at the elementary. One is they have young children and then they don't stay. They're here for a few years and then leave. But then also what you're seeing is kids can exit this program by earning English proficiency. So you would expect to see smaller numbers at the higher level as kids go through the program. Just some statistics here. Out of that 128, 80, which is 62.5%, have Arabic as their primary language. The next closest, with 20 students, is Chinese, is next. That leaves a handful of kids, and I had to write these down to make sure I get them right. We also have, spoken by our students here in our district, Setswana, Urdu, Korean, Russian, Spanish, Malay, Farsi, Kurdish, just to name some other languages that kids are coming with. So a lot of unique needs in educating kids speaking several different languages there. Of that 128, just this year, make sure I get this right, we had 25 students move in brand new with no English background, no past English education at all. So
Wow.
completely speaking a separate language. So you can imagine the challenges that come with that, especially a young kindergartner, first grade, who's trying to process this whole educational system. So they're going to talk with you about some of the supports that we put in place and some of the things that we do to help those kids, because it's pretty challenging for them to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Sima and Karen. They're going to give you an overview of the program, all the way from identifying students to what it takes on the other end to test out with English proficiency, socially and academically, which are two different things. So I'll turn it over to who's starting first. Sima? Okay.
Hi. The concerns of the ESL teacher. Primarily trying to schedule students based on proficiency levels and mainly taken out during ELA, communication arts, title time, pride time, RTI, or academic skills. The concerns for the classroom teacher. The ESL curriculum, though similar, are separate from the mainstream curriculum goals. We work with the teachers to explain modifications and grading procedures. We try to accommodate all schedules to work for the students and the teachers. However, with approximately 165 students, 40 are on monitored 1 or monitored 2, we can only stretch our schedules so far. So sometimes a compromise is necessary. Identification of ESL students. Once identified, the WAPT English Proficiency Test is administered to determine whether a student qualifies for the program and what the student's level of proficiency, English proficiency is, in the 4 domains: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Levels of English proficiency. WAPT WIDA placement evaluations. Students serviced in an ESL program are given the WIDA access test yearly to determine proficiency levels and to progress towards exiting.
The students are primarily placed in the program in a timely manner, and they're grouped with students of similar language proficiencies and grade levels. We also utilize 2 different programs. We either push into the classroom and collaborate directly with the teachers, or we do pull-out method where we're working in small groups or one-on-one. We also utilize a lot of time just transitioning them into the classroom for our lowest of our English speakers. The levels of English proficiency. Entering, it's obvious. They know minimal English. Reaching, this is when they have achieved that goal of social and academic language at grade level to the fullest potential. And modes of communication explains how you can differentiate between the two. The basic interpersonal communication skills is basically conversation fluency. This confuses a lot of parents. It also confuses the classroom teachers because they're speaking English. However, the cognitive academic language proficiency, this is when it's grade appropriate academic language that's being used fluently, and this doesn't take a mere 2 years. This can take as long as 5 years for a student. Now that's not an average, that's just based on research, but that's what we're seeing in our district. Implementing the ESL program, basically testing the new students, creating schedules, choosing ESL curriculum or grade level curriculum, collaborating with the content area teachers, trying to use as many of their textbooks as possible, with modifications, collaborating with administration. Bringing the expertise together. The buzzword is collaboration. The mainstream teacher knows the content area. She also knows the availability of a variety of learning materials, and she's trained in the English and the ELA program that's being implemented, as well as the reading curriculum. However, the ESL teacher brings in strategies for differentiation, cultural knowledge, language acquisition theory, and learning expectations. We could tell you many stories on the cultural knowledge, but we won't. Materials. We use anything and everything, and I'm not above begging and borrowing, because we need everything that they have in the classroom, anything from hands-on manipulatives, the actual ABC cards. I even learned the songs, and so does Sima, that they sing in the classrooms, because I didn't know my ABC song was wrong until my children told me. But we use many learning strategies and supplementals, pull out. We even went through and weeded through some old books and found some nuggets of gold. The techniques to accommodate ESL teachers. Students are taught learning strategies within the ESL classroom to help them in the mainstream classroom, such as vocabulary attack strategies, pre-reading strategies, note-taking and listening strategies, as well as writing strategies. And for my junior high and high school, I teach ACT prep. Assessment and collaborative settings. Basically, these are options that are recommended and most normally agreed upon between the ESL teacher, classroom teachers, counselors, administrators, and it can be anything from modifying a test, or our newest students are on a pass-fail system where if they are attempting and trying, they pass. If they're not accommodating the teacher in any fashion, we both talk about it and decide that it's a fail. We don't want them to fail. We want them to succeed academically and in English. So collaboration with staff and parents is very important. Mail conference is our training that we do attend thanks to the funds that are provided. But we implemented something new this year. Our focus is with the classroom teachers, administration, but we wanted to pull our parents in. We wanted to involve them. So we collaborate from both sides. Celebration of Nations is the community project. So we pulled them in the night before to discuss this and also tell them a little bit about our program, and to invite them back in the spring to participate along with the University International Association, their students, and all the other students at Rolla Middle School and across the district that want to participate in that spring international fair. So our focus is on all of it: classroom teachers, children, parents, getting them to learn the language, but we also focus on exiting them. Procedures for exiting an ESL student may vary according to the access score, grade level of a student, and recommendation of an ESL teacher. Once they exit, we monitor them, and what that basically means is that they're in a classroom, they're solo. We speak to them if we see them in the hallway, but basically we're monitoring them via the Infinite Campus. We check grades, attendance, disciplines. Teachers still email us and let us know if there's a problem. But basically, they're monitored for 2 years, and after that, they're completely out of the program. So the benefits for the ESL and the mainstream teachers, well, pretty much this sums it up nicely. Meeting the diversity of all student learning needs. Diversity is not necessarily race or color of skin or even the language. It's learning styles too. So in my classroom at Rolla Middle School, we have a theme this year. It's called One World, Many Stories. And that really is what our program is about.
Very nice.
Very nice.
So each year I think it's, and Karen and Sima help me out, around February, students will take an additional standardized test who are part of this program. You can see the access test. And that measures English proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And what we often find, as they mentioned, there's a big difference between social language and the ability to speak with peers. And when people will see that, they'll think, well, they have English down. But this test really goes deeper into, are they able to be successful in the classroom with academic language? And it's tough. And what we find is that a lot of times the speaking and listening are pretty high, but The one that takes more time is the writing portion and being able to write and use academic language. And we'll find a lot of times maybe that's what has a student just below the score needed to exit the program. But as you can see, they've done a lot to tie into the community. Our relationship with the university and the international office is going really well. We've got courses at the adult ed going on at RTI to help with some English language acquisition skills for community members, and just a lot of good things going on. It's hard work. There's the staffing. We have these 2 teachers, and then a half-time aide is split between special ed and ELL over at Truman, because you saw those very large numbers over there, so a little more support in that building than the others. But they do really good work, and you'll see them running. They're at every campus, so they're running around and doing their thing.
So just 2.5 teachers for that 160.
It's actually 2 teachers and a half paraprofessional.
Wow.
And this is Karen's second year with, last year was her first year. So Simma's been with us. Simma, when did 2000? 2000. So she's been here all along. So she's seen this exponential growth. And prior to Karen coming, it was Simma with a full-time aide and then the half-time aide. But with the numbers kept growing and we just saw a greater instructional need, is when we brought on the second full-time teacher. Last year was the first year for that. So we're grateful for you allowing us to do that, because it's certainly helped.
Good. Yeah, when I have some student teachers and I see Sim everywhere in the hallways, and, don't I? And then I was in a first grade classroom where the teacher had a child that spoke no English at all, that they had just moved from, and I can't remember where it was, but it was very interesting to see how that little, and I'll tell you what, the kids helped. I mean, the little kids just really kind of helped that little child too. It was really a neat thing to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Laurie's classroom for a minute yesterday, and she said that student over there is new. He doesn't speak any English, but he was interacting with the kids.
Yeah. There's kind of that common bond, like when little bitty ones almost can understand each other when none of us can. It's something like that, you know. But it's really is interesting.
So a student comes in and speaks no English. How much time do you have available to spend with that child?
Karen, can you step up to the microphone there, please?
We kind of throw our schedule to the side for momentarily so we can get them acclimated, usually if it's a seasoned teacher that's had them, we know that it's going to be smoother sailing. If it's a brand new teacher that's never had an ESL student, it's a little bit harder. But we get in as quickly as we can and assess them on how much English they really do have, and then we just set some goals for immediate transition, getting them started. And if it's smooth going, then we can back out and go back to our schedule, adding them in where they need to go. If it's not, we try to give them as much time as we possibly can. A good example is we have a high school student, and I'm only there a couple of times a week, and she really is soloing. But I have wonderful teachers that email me. They let me know how things are going, let me know when tests are coming up, so I can get over there and help her a little bit more before she takes her test.
So do you meet with, let's say, all the kids at Truman, do you meet with those kids in groups, or do you meet with kids individually?
It's a variety.
Variety of things.
This year is the first year that I've pushed in to the kindergarten classrooms and worked with them, but we have a high number of advanced students, so I just don't see the need to pull them out when we have about 15 students that are have no English. So I work with those teachers. Simma, you pull out pretty much all the grades. She does more pull out than I do at this time.
And on average, how much time would a kid see one of you during the week?
If they're basic, we see them about an hour and a half to 2 hours a week. Right now, with the push into kindergarten, they're actually seeing me 3 to 5 hours for those, since there's such a high number there. But for the rest of the students, they see us about twice a week for 30 minutes, and then the advanced, they see us bi-weekly for about half an hour. So, but it's the advanced means we're talking more to the teacher and checking on them, making sure they're learning.
I think the parent connection is so important.
Yeah.
I do too. I do too. Every one of the students, we had 20 parents. Every one of our students mentioned, my dad was there or my mom was there. And they love it. I can't wait until we have our international food. You
Yeah.
all have to come for it.
Yeah.
There will be food, there will be culture, and I had a first the other day that was just monumental. Had a 5-year-old interpreter because Amber Garrett has a brand new Chinese student, and his behavior was not quite acceptable. So I was sitting next to him and still not getting him to understand. So I just looked over and I said, "Tell him to stop it now." And she looked at him and he stopped and he looked up at me and he looked back at her. So a 5-year-old interpreter, I think we need to hire her.
Well, doesn't a lot of that happens informally, and I'm sure you probably do some of that formally as well, don't
Well,
you?
this
where you
was the
match?
first year that I had to tell my students at middle school, I do the 3 strikes you're out, and then I haven't decided what I'm going to do because they haven't lost all 3 strikes yet, but English only. You know, at the university, I have this problem with the adults, but with my middle school, they'll be whispering. And I said, no, we speak English. Explain it to him in English so we all can understand, because if you say it in Arabic, only he understands, the 3 Chinese do not. So it's been a little bit of a challenge.
That's very hard to do.
It
to
is,
get
especially
people-
then whenever I give in and say, okay, tell him in Arabic, I really want him to understand this, or tell her in Chinese. But they've come along. They understand now the parameters of this is when you can, this is when we're teaching and speaking English. They're interesting.
And some of those parents, I know Laurie, several years ago, for more than a couple of years, had a parent that didn't speak English that volunteered with her through the volunteer program. That seems like a neat way to also engage them if they
Absolutely.
can.
Well, I beg all the time for interpreters or for tutors from the university to come and to help with the kids, especially the male role models for our Arabic boys
Mhm.
to come and, you know, work with ABCs or whatever, but they're just so busy. I did have one Arabic speaking man that came from the university. I called in a favor because we really wanted to make sure the student was understanding. I was guessing, I don't think this child is understanding. So whenever he came in and talked to him, well, he had quite the conversation, and I could see it was very fluent, and he was very knowledgeable sharing with this young man. And so finally, when it was all over with, I asked him, I said, do you think he understands everything that you were talking about? He said, oh, he did great. He said, but he told me he does not understand anything those teachers say in English. They need to slow down. Okay, so I took that back to the teachers, and it improved him much.
You know, one of the challenges we have that we've dealt with are ELL students who maybe have a learning disability or need Title I services.
Goodness.
It's very hard, it's very challenging to determine whether their academic struggles are due to their English skills or whether it's due to a learning disability. So these ladies have worked very closely with the special ed teachers in some referrals that we've had, and we've worked through it, and in the end, we do have some students who are receiving special ed services or Title I services that we were able to determine, we believe, that the struggles they were having were beyond just any struggles they're having with English. But that's really hard, and teachers will ask us that a lot about how we do it, and we've sought guidance from the experts at the state and national levels to help us with that. And it takes a lot of time, but that does come up.
Thought of that. Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very
both so
much.
much for being here. Thank you.